The first Mishna Brachot, which is of course also the first Mishnah in Shas Mishnayos, begins with a question. Me'ematai korin et Shema barvit. When can we begin saying Shema in the evening? Presumably, there are two possible approaches to answer this question. One approach would try to investigate when does the night begin, because this is the Kriyat Shema of Arvit. And then the answer might be Shkiat HaChama or Tzeit HaKochavim. Another approach would say that we don't look at cosmological time, but we would look at more at human time. And as the mitzvah of Shema for the night is defined by B'shach Bacha, so it would be, we would look at when do people go to sleep. As a result, it's quite surprising the answer given to this question, which takes us to a very different place. The Mishnah answers the question, Me'matai korin et Shema barvit, misha'a shakohanim nichnasim le'achol b'tumatam. From the time that the Kohanim come in to eat the Truma. Now, it's not clear and not explained why, at this point in time, that the Kohanim, the end of the day, they've gone to the mikvah, and they now enter the house to eat their Truma. What does this have to do with Kriyat Shema? Now, you may answer that this time is identified with Tzeit HaKochavim, and maybe this is just a way to tell us Tzeit HaKochavim, which the coming out of the stars, which defines nighttime. But there are two problems with this. First of all, it would have been a lot easier if the Mishnah said Tzeit HaKochavim. That's a much more recognizable point in time than Kohanim nichnasim le'achol b'trumatam. But second of all, the Tosefta, when it brings down the time of the Mishnah, the time that the Kohanim go in to eat, it says siman ledavar. The siman, the way to remember this is Tzeit HaKochavim. In other words, the Mishnah Tosefta relates to the time of Tzeit HaKochavim, but that's a siman to help remember. But the real reason is the time Kohanim come in to eat the Truma. What does this have to do with mitzvah Kriyat Shema? Now, the Gemara gives a number of additional answers to the question about when to say Kriyat Shema at night. One of them is the time that aniyim, poor people, come in to eat in the evening. Another answer to the Gemara is from times that people come in on Shabbos to eat. And of course we have our Mishnah that talks about the time that the Kohanim come in to eat. Now, there are differences between these different answers in the Gemara, but there's a common denominator to all of them. And the common denominator is they all have to do with that point in time that somebody comes into his house in the evening in order to eat. So I believe that the answer to the question we're dealing with, why is this the time for Kriyat Shema, has to do with the fact that the essential factor defining the time of Kriyat Shema is not b'shach bacha ufkumecha, but rather the other words that appear in the pasuk, b'shiftecha b'beitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech. We say Kriyat Shema twice a day. Why twice? Because our lives are broken up into two major components. But the major components of our lives is not divided between sleeping time and waking time. Rather, the fundamental distinction of our days is the time that we spend in our homes, in the inside, in our familiar environment. That's b'shiftecha b'beitecha. And the time that we spend going outside of our homes and meeting the world, doing what we do, not our families, but our careers, and that's b'lechtecha b'derech. And the message of Kriyat Shema, and why we're doing this, why we're saying it twice a day, is to say that the essence of Kriyat Shema is Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim, feeling connected to God within your life. And your life is divided fundamentally into two parts, two modes, and we want both modes to be connected to God. We know they say that in Germany once there was a slogan, a Jew in your house, a person on the outside. That people felt that in my homes I'll practice Judaism, but when I go out into the wide world, I want to be a regular person, regular German, and hide my unique Jewish features. On the other hand, there are people that maybe take the opposite approach. On the outside, social pressure will have them at least act like Jews who believe and serve God, but at home they're doing whatever they like. And the message of Kriyat Shema twice this day is saying, Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim is in your home domain, and Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim is also in the outside domain. A Jew in the house and a Jew out of the house. And the next question would be, how to define when the nightlife begins. In ancient times, when coming home would be when you come home, you begin by eating your meal. But different people come home at different times. If you want something set for people in general, what will represent the archetype of the person who comes home and is Oved Hashem and is Makabel Malchut Shemayim. So I think that's what underlies the different approaches in the Gemara. Are we going to look at the ani, the poor person? Because often we look at our coming in front of God as coming empty-handed, realizing our emptiness in front of the infinite nature of God. However, ultimately, the Mishnah chose a different approach. The Mishnah chose the approach of seeing us as coming in front of God as a Kohen, realizing that all of us, Am Yisrael is Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, and all of us, we approach God as a Kohen and live our lives as just like a Kohen in the Beit HaMikdash serves God. Each of us in the world is also a Kohen serving God. In fact, throughout the Mishnah, we're using imagery from the Beit HaMikdash. We spoke till now about the beginning of Zman Kriyat Shema, but the Mishnah later talks about the end of Zman Kriyat Shema. And there too, we're focusing on times from the Mikdash. The first answer is Ad Sof Hashmura Rishona, until the end of the first watch. And we know from other Mishnayos, such as Yoma, that in the Beit HaMikdash, there's a mitzvah of Shmira, and the night was divided into three parts of different Shomrim who did the Shmira in the Beit HaMikdash. The other answers, V'chachamim amrim ad chatzot, Rabbi Gamliel omer ad shialeh amud hashachar. The other answers are either, you could say Shema till chatzot or till olat hashachar. However, from the later part of the Mishnah, we discover that these times too are connected to the Beit HaMikdash and the eating of the karbanot. The Mishnah says, Kol ma shamru chachamim ad chatzot, whenever the chachamim say you could till midnight, mitzvatan ad shialeh amud hashachar. For example, hekter chalavim ve'varim, mitzvatan ad shialeh amud hashachar. V'kol hanechalim liyom achad, all korbanot that are eaten for one day, mitzvatan ad shialeh amud hashachar. The mitzvah is in fact till alot hashachar. Im kein lam amru chachamim ad chatzot, kedei larchik et ha'adam min avera. So not only the beginning of Kriyat Shema, we're looking at us as Kohanim, the end time of Kriyat Shema is also focusing pattern after life in the Beit HaMikdash. So the first Mishna Brachot teaches us an important message that that in the day as the night we are makabel ol malchut shemayim, and both modes we are oved Hashem, but in both these modes we approach God as a kohen in the mikdash. And let's go on to see the second Mishna Brachot that deals with the times of Kriyat Shema of the morning. And here too, we could learn a lot about, not only about the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema, but a lot about who we are. Mishnah Bet, Me'matai korin et Shema b'shacharit. From when can we read Shema in the morning? Mishyakir ben tchelet lelavan. Rabbi Eliezer Omer ben tchelet lekarti. We have the beginning of Shema is connected to the mitzvah of tzitzit, which presumably is the reason why we look for the time that you could distinguish between the tchelet and the lavan, the blue and the white. Tchelet is a symbolically represents the heavens, and from the time to accept Ol Malchut Shemayim is a time that you could recognize the heavens themselves. The second opinion is the time that you could see the difference between blue and green. Now that could seem a little bit peculiar. The blue and the white we understand because that's tzitzit, because we have a blue thread string and we have a white string. But why is it significant to know the difference between blue and green? But I think the answer is that when you distinguish between blue and white, you're not really seeing the blue. You're distinguishing. You realize intellectually that this must be blue because it's darker than the other strings, which presumably are the white ones. So you know this is the blue, but you're not really experiencing the blue. To say that Kriyat Shema starts at the time that you can see the difference between blue and green, that means, because these are similar colors, that means that you're really seeing the blue. I think Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim is not only about intellectually knowing about God, but it's about knowing that it's blue, but it's also about experiencing God, really being able to really perceive and see the blue. If we mentioned earlier our standing in front of God as Kohanim in the first Mishnah, maybe I'll mention also that seeing that the mitzvah of Shema this morning starts at the time that we begin being Mekayim in the mitzvah of tzitzis. Tzitzis is also a connection between us and Kohanim, because the two major aspects of tzitzit is that they have ptil tchelet, they have the tchelet inside of them, and they can be made out of shatnez, the linking together of tzemer and pishtan, wool and linen. And these are exactly the characteristics of bigdei kuhuna, which shows that each of us have a special garment just like the Kohanim. So till now we've been learning about how we're all Kohanim standing in front of God. But there's another message that appears in the second half of the Mishnah. The Mishnah continues, V'gomra adanei tzachama. The first opinion is that we could finish Shema till we have until Netzachama, the rising of the sun, to say Shema. Now, if that was the only opinion, we'd all have to wake up quite early. Fortunately, there's a second opinion in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yeshua Omer ad shaloshot. We have 3 hours after sunrise to say Shema. Why is that the case? Shekein derech b'nei malachim lamod v'shaloshot. Because this is the way of princes, the children of the king, to wake up 3 hours in the day. Now, this Mishnah might be somewhat peculiar, because if we want to try to find if the time of Kriyat Shema in the morning is defined by uf kumecha, or the time that we get up, I would look for some type of an average. Why should we define getting up in the morning by this exclusive group of B'nai Malachim that probably are statistically insignificant? But clearly I believe that the answer is telling us a message again about who we are. We know there's a concept said that appears often in Mishnayot, that Am Yisrael as a whole, the Jewish people, are B'nai Melachim. We are the children of the king. We relate to God not only as Malkeinu, our king, but also we know Avinu Malkeinu, our king, but also our father. And here what we're saying is that whoever we are, no matter how down we are, always remember who we are. You're children of the king. You are all B'nai Melachim. Maybe to bring one context that this idea appears, the Mishnah in Perek in Shabbat, Perek Yud Dalid, Mishnah Dalid, it talks about people anointing themselves with this very special shemen, oil. And the Mishnah said, first opinion says you can't anoint yourself with this oil on Shabbos because it's very expensive and people only use it for health reasons. And there's an isser to do refuah b'Shabbat. But, however, the Mishnah says, but if you're a prince, princes use this oil even as a matter of course, it's because they're so high class, so they're always using this very expensive type of anointing oil. But then Rabbi Shimon comes and says, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol Yisrael b'nei Melachim heim. All of Yisrael b'nei Melachim. There is nothing inappropriate for anyone in Yisrael, no matter what his socioeconomic status is, to be using this very special oil on Shabbos, because all of Yisrael are b'nei Melachim. And that's what I believe the Mishnah is teaching us. Maybe I'll mention that the Shema is the mitzvah of Kabbalat all Malchut Shemayim. Now that could sound a little bit intimidating, but accepting the yoke of Malchut Shemayim. However, if you remember that the Melech is our father, makes it much easier to connect up to the fact that, again, it's Malkeinu, but also Avinu. You know, there's a story, maybe I'll end with a story that Rav Bezenson brings down. There was once a little boy standing on the shore, and there was this enormous ocean liner. And from a distance, the little boy is waving to the ship. And somebody asks him, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm waving to the captain of the ship. And the person says, silly boy, do you think the captain of that enormous ship is going to pay any attention to this little kid standing on the shore? He goes, yes, I know. He's looking at me. He goes, why on earth do you think the captain of the ship is going to be looking at you? And the little boy turns and says, because the captain of the ship, he's my father.